Thank you. I want to tell you about this organization, CUSP, that we're standing up here in New York. The organization is only a few months old, so most of what I have to say is perspective, but you'll find that it nicely brings together some of the themes we've heard already this morning from Michael and from Blake. CUSP is about two big, simple ideas. The first is that big data can be brought to bear on societal issues. Our ability to collect, transmit, store, analyze data is growing rapidly. And so one is naturally led to the question of how can you instrument society? How can you know what's going on? What do you want to know? And what could you do with that information, both in a descriptive sense and in a prescriptive sense? You might be interested to know that my own thinking about this started about 2 years ago when I was in the government, and I commissioned a study by the national laboratories on greenhouse gas treaty verification, a rather esoteric subject, which is about the following. If the US were ever to sign up to an international treaty limiting greenhouse gas emissions, and then 10 years later, China came to us and said, we did it, how would you know? How would you have independent verification of that? And the answer is a combination of self-reporting by a nation, in situ air sampling, where you grab pieces of air in the country and measure the CO2 concentration, overhead observations from satellites of the CO2 emissions, and finally, proxies in society of CO2 emissions, such as the number of coal cars or the number of power plants that are generating. And putting all of that together, you can get some reasonable estimate of greenhouse gas emissions. That's a very good example of how you would like to be able to better understand what's going on in society. The second theme is cities. Most people are in cities. Right now, 50% of the world lives in urban environments. By the middle of the century, that number is going to go up to 80% globally. In North America, we're already 80% in cities, and that number will go to 90% in the next 40 years. So cities are where resources are consumed, they are where economic activity happens, and they're where innovation happens. My friend Jeff West, who studies cities generically, likes to say that cities are the cause of our problems over the next 40 years, but they're also the place where those problems will get solved. Cities have to be efficient, they have to be resilient, they have to be sustainable, and address quality of life issues for the people that live in them. Any given city needs to be as good as it can be because we're in a global competition for talent, for capital, and all cities need to be as good as they can be because of the global issues. So what does it mean to instrument a city? When you step back and think about it, cities deliver services to their citizens through infrastructure and through processes. Those services are shelter, safety, security, health, food, water, waste, energy, mobility, etc. You want to know how those systems operate and how do they interact and how can you optimize them. We've seen some early successes, predictive policing in New York and now elsewhere around the world, modest gains in traffic management, and I'm now going to add yellow grease to the list as well. But there's much more that we can do. What do we need to instrument? We need to understand about the infrastructure, its condition, where are the joints corroding in the bridges, where are the leaks in the pipelines, where's the insulation in the buildings, and its operation, traffic management, the electrical grid management. We need to understand about the environment, not only the obvious meteorological variables, but noise, pollution, temperature that people experience, so on. And then finally, we need to understand about the people. Cities are built by and for people, after all, and you can't study them and understand them without studying the people. I want to know people's location. We already heard a bit about that this morning. Their economic activity, their communication activities, their health, et cetera, et cetera. And before you all say it, I'll say it, privacy, a very important consideration as one goes into this activity. I'm not going to say more about it right now, but we're thinking a lot about it, and it's built into many of the things that we're going to be doing. If you can instrument a city, know everything that's going on, there are many kinds of people who are interested. The government is interested. We've already talked about the interest of the local government, making things more efficient. The federal government is interested, in part because it's starting to get worried about its ability to produce good statistics by conventional methods, like surveys that are used to generate census or labor statistics. The citizens are clearly interested also. There is a big movement around the world to open up city data to the citizens. People are doing wonderful things about it and starting to realize the way in which cities serve or don't serve their needs. The second is the private sector. Many of you work in that sector, I expect. Retail for advertising, insurance to better stratify risk and understand how to better price insurance, the financial folks, the political folks. In this political season, there's a great deal of data mining and analysis going on to target the campaigns. The security organizations, local police, law enforcement, Homeland Security, international. It's no accident, perhaps, that the CIA is a sponsor of this conference. Their job is to understand what's going on in countries outside of the US around the world. They have a different kind of problem, by and large, these security folks. They're interested in finding needles in the haystack, whereas largely what we are interested in is understanding the shape of that haystack and how it changes as the city goes on. And then finally, the social scientists. The last talk showed a bit of what is possible. It's extraordinarily exciting. Social science currently is a discipline that's largely dominated by surveys. You put together a questionnaire, you go out and you ask 1,000 people well-controlled questions, clean up the data, and try to draw inferences. Or you look at aggregated data flows. We can, as you saw this morning already, start to suck up data on hundreds of thousands of people at once and really try to understand how people behave, in short, looking at the pulse of the city. Okay, where are we going to get data? You've already seen one example, Michael talking about organic data flows, administrative records, permits, census, and so on. There is transactional data out there, sales, communications, operational data, traffic, transit, the utility bills, the health system. There are sensors. We can imagine sensors that are personal sensors, the cell phones for location, activity, physiology. We can have fixed in situ sensors, such as surveillance cameras. We can do crowdsourcing. Again, we've seen that. Choke points. I can put sensors at highway on-ramps. In California, we'd say freeway on-ramps, building entrances, and then remote sensing. And there are opportunities to look at the city in ways that people have not looked at it before. Various kinds of spectral imaging, LiDAR, which is capable of measuring chemicals and pollution, magnetic sensors that measures big currents and moving metal, seismic acoustic. You can go on and on if you're a physicist. There's a wonderful list of such things you can imagine. Here are some pretty pictures. Cell phones, of course, not only for location, physiological sensing through that jawbone bracelet, but other kinds of gadgets that we can hang onto or build in to cell phones. The cameras, most of the imagery from cameras, of which there are thousands throughout the city, just goes on the floor, and nobody does anything with it. Overhead imagery from satellites, records we've talked about, and then something we're thinking about a lot is big buildings. That's a schematic of some of the big buildings around the world. New York City, we're up at about 500 meters now, and from the top of those buildings you can see a lot. And the question is, what could you do with that data? I'll show you one more example of sensing. This is an image of Manhattan in the infrared. So you're looking at the heat rather than the light that your eye sees. And there are several interesting things about this picture worth noting. If you look at the building on the almost far left, you can see individual offices or apartments. I have no idea what that building is. We could obviously find out. Some of them are leaking a lot of heat, either because the thermostat is turned up or the insulation is poor, or both. The building in the middle, which is red on the bottom and red on the top, and yellow in the middle, is hot on the bottom, hot on the top, and cool in the middle. Why is that? I have no idea. But that's pretty interesting. Something's going on there. And then the last thing is that this is one camera, and it's looking at probably 50,000 people. It's a different kind of data collection than the detailed in situ sensing. It has some advantages, it has some disadvantages, and one of the challenges is to marry up those two kinds of collection methodologies together. All right, so what can you do with the data? There's a long, long list. I'm not going to go through it. You can optimize operations, traffic, utility. You can do infrastructure monitoring. You can do planning, travel and intersection patterns for epidemiology, hazard detection for leaks, emergency response. You can go on and on. All right. With that as background, let me now tell you about CUSP. CUSP is part of the New York City Applied Sciences Initiative. You may remember the mayor announced a competition about 2 years ago to bring more engineering or technology, or however you want to describe it, to the city. The first winner of that competition was Cornell Technion, who won the right to build a campus on Roosevelt Island, and that's underway. CUSP was the second winner, announced last April, and there you can see the mayor, John Sexton, the president of NYU, Jerry Holton, president of NYU Poly, various other dignitaries at the announcement. What are we? We're a partnership, three-way partnership between universities led by NYU, NYU Poly, involving Carnegie Mellon, Toronto, Warwick in the UK, City University, and IIT Mumbai. A set of industrial partners, most prominently IBM and Cisco, with participation also from Siemens, Xerox, importantly in the city Con Ed and National Grid, and then lesser participation from a number of consultancies. And then finally, and maybe uniquely, the city and state agencies. 13 of the agencies in New York City, together with the MTA and the Port Authority. I should note that as we've announced this and it started to become more real, a diverse set of other organizations, other universities, other industrial folks, and other non-governmental organizations have expressed an interest in coming in. What's the vision? As Drew mentioned, the vision is New York City as a laboratory. If you just read through this for a moment, a unique public-private research center using New York City as a lab and classroom to help cities do better. We're about the data. We observe, we analyze, and model cities to help them optimize outcomes, new solutions, new tools. We're about not only research and education, but also about real deployment, at least in a demonstration mode. Scale. In 5 years, we expect to have 50 full-time senior researchers, 30 of them faculty, mostly newly hired, 20 industrial folks from the partners on site, 30 postdocs, 400 master's students, 100 PhDs. Headquarters will be in downtown Brooklyn. In January, we move into 26,000 square feet in One Metrotech. And in 5 years, assuming things go well, we'll have 150,000 square feet in 370 J Street, which is the old subway headquarters. It's where the money train used to go. The budget, speaking of money, budget $70 million a year. A lot of it from the federal government, we hope. There are many, many ways in which the federal agencies are interested in this kind of activity. The corporate money, philanthropic and academic funding, tuition, and other university funds. I'd say a word about the educational program. Starting just about a year from now, we will admit a class to take a one-year master's program in applied urban science and informatics. The curriculum combines the informatics disciplines, which I will show you in a moment, together with the urban domains, transit, buildings, public health, security, together with softer skills in governance, organizational change, finance, entrepreneurship. It has a strong project component, which I will describe for you again in a moment. And then in the following years, we hope to introduce a PhD program in urban systems, various other continuing education programs, joint degrees, et cetera, et cetera. We hope to be training people who are either in now or who will know the agencies and know how to apply informatics techniques to urban problems. We expect that they will find employment throughout the city agencies, both here in New York and elsewhere around the world, the corporations who support those agencies, startups, NGOs, and so on. I'll talk a little bit about how we think about the research program. I need to, first of all, have a set of faculty and the students and postdocs who work for them who embrace the core informatics disciplines. The acquisition of data, whether through web scraping, mobile phones, organic data flows, new sensors. I need faculty who know how to integrate that data together, clean it up. A GIS capability is extraordinarily important for this. And then I need people who know how to do the analysis, whether it's data mining, agent-based modeling, operations research, et cetera, et cetera. And there are a whole set of names for the kinds of disciplines that we're looking for. I then need a set of folks who know the urban domains, whether it's transportation, health, utilities, and so on. And then we will have a set of strongly managed projects that tap into those informatics disciplines in order to solve problems within those domains. Social science is an important component of what we hope to do. As again was already mentioned this morning, these kinds of techniques will revolutionize social science. NYU is a particularly strong place in the social sciences, which is why I'm here doing this project. Interactions with them will be very important. And then finally, we hope to create a living laboratory, a neighborhood, perhaps 20 blocks in radius around headquarters in downtown Brooklyn, where we can much more completely instrument the society, of course, with the permission and buy-in from the community, to really create a living laboratory and understand in a very detailed way what's going on. Just finally, to close up and give you a flavor of the projects we're considering, or some sense of what we hope to be doing. First of all, start by cleaning up the city data sets. If you go to Open Data NYC, it's a real dog's breakfast. Great variability in the quality, currency, completeness of the data sets. We think just cleaning them up, making them interoperable, making them available to the public with standard data mining tools is an important part of our own infrastructure. It'll also help the city get its own house better in order. 3D urban GIS capability, really important. We're working to start to build that. Multi-data correlations to improve resource allocation. You already heard some examples of that from Michael. Many more such things can be done, even with just open data sets. Environmental issues. Noise is high on our list. More than half of the 311 calls are noise related. If we can better characterize the noise, define ambient, and help target enforcement resources, that would be a very interesting thing to do. Good mix of sensor deployment together with data analysis. Temperature, how do we better optimize the city's response to high temperature days? Pollution, simply by monitoring in real time and putting up on a map in high spatiotemporal resolution, the particulate pollution will, I think, start to induce building owners to change from heating oil to natural gas and fix more than half of the particulate pollution in the city. Mobility, we've got some ideas, no time to go into them in detail. Novel sensing of public health, building efficiency, all of these are on our list. And finally, what does this living lab thing look like? Let me close. The clicker's dead. This is the last slide, so that's great. Look, we are getting started. We're shaping this organization. Obviously, I think there's great potential to interact with this community. I'm here now simply telling you what directions we're headed in. Would look for opportunities as we get going to engage you all in various ways. Thanks for your attention.